if we just found that they had a lot of inflammation in their gut, really the best thing is to find out what's the main trigger for them. But there's also going to be multiple things coming from all angles. So a big thing is avoiding inflammatory foods. So those, seed oils.
It's quite shocking how we are being completely bombarded from every direction, but the human body is quite miraculous.
Pouring bleach on the mold is actually just going to make it worse and more toxic for you, and very likely hasn't actually taken care of the problem because those spores are going to be in the air. It's going to come back.
Welcome to the Wellness Way with me, Philly J. Lay, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS.
Hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of the Wellness Way. And I've got another Wellness Way guest with me today, an absolutely lovely chiropractic doctor, Dr. Kaytlin Westerberg. She is from Minnesota. You went through a very traumatic experience when one of your children was 4 years old. And it led you on a path. And I'd like you to talk about that, if you don't mind, and just introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, so I am Dr. Kaytlin. I'm with the Wellness Way in Woodbury, Minnesota. So the Wellness Way is a network of health restoration clinics. We're located all over the US, and we do have one location in Ireland. But really, how I got started on this journey was I became a mom at the age of 20, so pretty young. And then I do have 3 boys, so it's a lot of fun, definitely a boy mom. But yes, when my oldest son was 4, he was diagnosed with autism. So he had some signs pretty early on, and really like the lack of eye contact. He had some digestive issues. He could say a lot of words, and he could read books from really early age. He started reading around nine months.
Oh, wow.
Extremely advanced. But he wouldn't use words to communicate, and he wouldn't point at things. He wouldn't say like banana. If he wanted anything, he would just make noises. So there were a lot of signs, but we kind of just said, some kids develop at different, rates. So we weren't super concerned, but eventually we did get him screened, and he was diagnosed with autism. And I just wasn't super happy with my experience with the medical doctors. We went to specialist after specialist. I asked them, okay, you gave him this diagnosis. Now what do we do? Like, what's the game plan? Do we change his diet? Do we need to change our lifestyle in any way? Do we need to filter our water? And they're all just like, nope, it's genetic.
Oh my God.
And I did not like that answer. Growing up, I always thought if someone was diagnosed with cancer or if someone was diagnosed with diabetes, I always thought, why? And a lot of people would say, oh, it's just genetics, where they got the bad luck of the draw. And I just didn't agree with that. And the same with my son. I just didn't agree with it. And I did a lot of research, and I noticed that there are so many different avenues you can get pulled with autism specifically. Like, you could do the GAPS diet, you can do a keto diet, you can do these enemas, or do these, what's even the word, stool transplants. And it's kind of, I was trying to discern, okay, what is actually going to help him and what is not going to help him. And I eventually just got to the point where I'm like, I need to become his doctor. I need to figure out, how does the body work? What does physiology do? What happens when, someone does have autism? Are there some common things going on with them? A really big common thing is a lot of gut issues. So I did end up going to chiropractic school. That's not the only reason I went, but that's a big reason behind it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. So I went to chiropractic school, and while I was in school, I discovered that we could read labs and interpret labs, which I never even knew before going to school. And we had to learn it to pass our boards. So I really dove into that and really enjoyed it. But then everyone said, well, as soon as you're done with boards, you're just going to throw all that out of your memory because you're not going to need it to adjust people, right? Well, then I found the Wellness Way, and I started going to the student club, and then I went to the Wellness Way out in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is where it was all started, and learn more and more about their approach to health and how they use labs and look at them through the eyes of function instead of pathology, to actually find out what's stressing out the body so you can actually have true health restoration. So that is what led me to this form of chiropractic specifically, which is kind of a very rare branch of chiropractic. adjusting, but also reading and interpreting labs and really looking at the body as, a whole. Like health is function. Health isn't just feeling good. So that's what led me to this point. And my son became a patient while I was in chiropractic school, and he had amazing results. He was able to speak in full sentences. He can speak now. He does need some speech therapy because it did take him so long to start speaking, but his gut issues resolved. We weren't getting calls from his school all the time saying, okay, he's a really stinky kid, like he's having all this gas, and we weren't getting those calls anymore. And it was just a big life changer for him. And it was kind of like seeing the light in his eyes that wasn't there before. So that just made me think, okay, there's no way I can practice chiropractic and not include this in my practice. So that's what led me to where I am today. And I've just seen so much, healing in my life and healing in my patients' lives. And it's been amazing, an amazing journey.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to come back to the gut for a moment. You mentioned, did you really get calls from the school saying he was a stinky kid?
Yes. So they would say, he's got a lot of gas. And I'm just like, okay, but what do I do about it? Like, no one wants to be the stinky kid at school, but I'm just like, okay, well, do you have suggestions for me? And of course, no, they're just like, you might need to figure it out. And of course, doctors don't have anything, the doctors I had seen didn't have anything to say about it. So definitely it was great finding doctors who could figure out, okay, why is he having all these gut issues and what can we actually do about it going forward?
Okay, so you talk about the gut then. So let's delve a little bit deeper into the gut because I love the gut. Stools tests I want to cover, and also stools transplants, because I find this fascinating. I only discovered it about 5 years ago, and I'm just like, what the fuck? People actually transplant stools? But it seems to have miraculous results. So let's talk about how you test the gut, because I know, I mean, I had leaky gut and I was in a terrible state for a couple of years of my life. And leaky gut is, you just feel shit. I mean, chronic fatigue, brain fog, autoimmune diseases popping up, not going away. I mean, just absolutely horrible, and a lot of wind or gas, as you call it. But I have heard various doctors talk about the fact that they've had stools tests and they've used the same stool and had 3 different tests and had completely different results. What can you tell us about your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that is, well, why were they getting the stool test in the first place? Was it an infection, and how long between those samples? I can't say for sure. I haven't read about that at all, but in my experience, I haven't seen, if you're not doing something to address either the digestion or the infections within, or adding a probiotic, prebiotic, I don't see a lot of big changes in between stool tests if patients aren't being compliant with recommendations. So a lot of times if someone comes to a retest and they haven't been taking their supplements, or they haven't changed their diet, or they haven't addressed their gut infections, a lot of times the same things will pop up for them in my experience. But if people have been taking antibiotics, or if they've had a big giant stressor in their life in between samples, that can have a big impact. So speaking to that, I'm not entirely sure why, and it just depends on what they're testing. So if you're thinking about in the medical realm, they have a few different ways of testing. So they're going to do the scope to check for inflammation, check for ulcers, check for redness. But then they're also, a lot of times they're going to check for H. pylori. And those are the 2 biggest things that I see often in, that patients are bringing into me as far as testing from their primary. But then here, what we do is we test the stomach, the gallbladder, the liver, and the pancreas to see how well are they releasing enzymes and stomach acid in order to break down your foods. How is the probiotic content in your gut? So that good microbiome that you need, is it overgrown? Is it undergrown? And then do you have any bacteria, yeast, or parasites that don't belong in your gut? So very often we do see some big changes once you address the stress.
Yes, stress is a big factor on all illness is inflammation in the body. And, if you've got that inflammation in the body, then you're not going to be healthy. So I want to talk about leaky gut a bit more. How do you test for leaky gut? Because I had tests and I didn't have leaky gut. But then I went on retreat and I did a food allergy test because I didn't understand why I felt so completely shit the whole time. So I did a food allergy test and I was allergic to something like 40 different things. And they were all things that I'd eaten in the last 24 hours, including lemons and limes and mint. And so the person that did my test said, well, you've got leaky gut. How do you test it? I mean, is there a solid, concrete way for people to find out if their gut is leaking?
So I don't diagnose leaky gut, so I'm looking for function of the gut. But when I do see a lot of inflammation in the stool test, in the results, that's a really good sign, because all leaky gut is when those cells that line your intestines become inflamed, they're going to get bigger and they're going to pull apart a little bit, and you're going to have those gaps. And that's where those bigger food particles are going to get through to your bloodstream. That's when your immune system has to come in, take those food particles out, and that's how you get those food allergies, that IgE, chronic inflammation response. So not the instant anaphylactic ones, but the chronic inflammation. You might not react for 3 days, 4 weeks after you have that food. That's kind of that leaky gut process, is inflammation in the gut leading to those cells pulling apart. So there are actually 3 different markers within a stool test that we run. We use Genova Diagnostics. They're one of the best for checking on the gut. And there are 3 different markers showing the immune response within the gut. And one of the big ones is going to be calprotectin, which is made from your white blood cells, but then also secretory IgA. That is your immune system living in that mucus lining of your intestines. So if I'm seeing a really big reaction and there's a lot, that just means there's a lot of inflammation going on. But if it's undetectable, that means that mucus lining might be very thin, or might just not be present in the way it needs to be present to really protect your gut against damage as well. So those are a couple of things that I look at. And then again, if they have a lot of food allergies, I've seen people with 35 food allergies. There's a pretty good chance that they have leaky gut.
Yeah, that's a lot of food allergies. And when I was a child, I don't remember anybody at my school having a food allergy. And now children, every single class that my children have been in have got somebody with a food allergy, normally nuts, peanuts in particular. Why do you think we have this huge allergy problem going on at the moment?
I think a big reason is that our world has just become so much more toxic than it was, even 50 years ago, with pollution, with processed foods. If you look at the labels of those foods, a lot of the ingredients in there, there's a lot of sugar, there's a lot of different names for sugar, and there's a lot of highly processed ingredients that we can't even pronounce. We don't even know what food it's derived from. Our bodies can't process that, and it's leading to a lot of inflammation in these little kids' guts, and then they end up with these food allergies or food sensitivities, that wasn't present, years ago.
You're absolutely right. And flavorings is a name that is put on a lot of ingredients, but apparently flavorings covers nearly 3,000 different items, which don't have to be classified. They're just flavorings. I'm lucky in the UK, we don't allow some of the really bad food colorants, like the red and the yellow, but I know in America you still do, don't you?
Yep, we've got them all.
I remember going into the first time I went to New York with my 2 little daughters when they were young, and we walked past M&M World, and they go, "Oh my God, Mummy, it's M&M World. Can we go to M&M World?" And I literally felt physically sick from the chemical response that I had walking in there. It was shocking. And they thought it was lovely then, but they opened one in London quite recently, and my children walked past it and messaged me and actually went, "Bloody hell, Mother, I know what you mean now. I can smell them." Okay, yep. So we're bombarding our children with these, incredibly toxic foods. We can throw in the seed oils to there and the heavy metals. So can we talk a little bit about the heavy metal load on the body?
Yeah, absolutely. Heavy metals We get them from our drinking water. If you have those silver fillings in your teeth, those typically have mercury in them. And every time you eat or drink anything, you're going to be exposed to even more mercury. And I had one of those fillings for must have been 15 years. I just had it removed a couple years ago. But that is just storing in your body.
You know, a lot of people think they can go to a hardware store and buy, you know, a normal kind of British water filter and it's going to, you know, filter their water, but it doesn't really get that much out, does it?
No, not nearly as much as it needs to, especially city water. City water is contaminated with pharmaceutical, medications. Like women who are on birth control, it gets into the water supply. They clean it as much as they can, but they can't actually get all that birth control out. So if you're drinking city water, you're drinking pharmaceuticals as well, at least trace amounts. So that Brita water filter just can't get that out.
No, it's quite shocking how we are being completely bombarded from every direction, but the human body is quite miraculous and it will do anything it can to survive. And we just have to hold on to that. And I'm a mad tapper. And I just, if I am having something bad, I just tap it out and go, you can't hurt me. I'm not having this. Go away. This isn't happening to me. And I just believe that works. I mean, you talked earlier about talking with your doctors about your son's autism, and they're going, it's genetic DNA. And I interviewed the amazing Dr. Bruce Lipton on the podcast, and he states very clearly that genetics actually have less than 1% effect on our health. It's all environment. And so what we need to do for our environment is clean it up a little bit. And what would be the first way that you would resolve leaky gut? How would you start asking your patients to heal that?
So if we just found that they had a lot of inflammation in their gut, really the best thing is to find out what's the main trigger for them. But there's also going to be multiple things coming from all angles. So a big thing is avoiding inflammatory foods. So those, seed oils, inflammatory oils, soy, corn, wheat in the United States is very heavily contaminated. So, I usually say try to avoid wheat because that's extremely inflammatory, at least here in the United States. A lot of people will not be able to tolerate gluten here in the US, and then they'll travel to France or to Italy and they can eat all the bread that they want because it's just so different. And then dairy can be quite inflammatory, but really the best thing is to get your food allergies tested. So there's the IgE allergy response. So the instant anaphylactic, like you ate a peanut, your throat swells up, or maybe you get hives, those things where you eat something and you can immediately tell you have an allergy. But also those IgG, so the chronic inflammation, delayed responding allergies, those are going to be really great for bringing down that inflammation. But then, as you're bringing down that inflammation, figure out what got you into that leaky gut process in the first place. It could be potentially gut infections. And if those aren't addressed, that's just going to keep going on. But then the reason we get those gut infections, how is your upper digestion? If your stomach acid is too low, which a lot of people are on antacids right now, trying to bring their stomach acid low, and those people are more at risk for the H. pylori and the gut infections because their stomach acid has two main purposes. It is to, number one, break down your foods. So it's going to break them down from bigger proteins down into smaller proteins and smaller amino acids that can actually be used by the body. But then the second use for stomach acid is it's going to sterilize your food. So, if you eat something that is contaminated with bacteria, with yeast, with parasites, your stomach acid should be able to kill that off before it ever gets into your intestines. Because if it gets into your intestines, that's when your immune system has to take over and attack it. And that's when you get that inflammatory response that can lead to that leaky gut process.
And also your body can start attacking itself. And, we have record levels of autoimmune diseases now. Can you give us any more insights into why, apart from the gut, is there any other reason that we can have those autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, so the gut is a big component, but also think of, chronic viral infections, Lyme, Epstein-Barr virus. Those viruses, and Lyme isn't technically a virus, but for, if Lyme, Epstein-Barr virus, they can last in your body, for your whole life, and they just lie dormant and they don't cause a lot of issues. They'll just hide out in tissues. But as soon as there's some kind of immune stressor where you're a little more susceptible, they can come out and start triggering that immune system again. So a really big thing that we do see with, for example, thyroid autoimmune diseases, a lot of them have a history of Epstein-Barr or mono, and that has come back out and has triggered their immune system so heavily and for so long that now their immune system will start to attack tissue. Now, that being said, your immune system isn't going to attack healthy tissue because your body doesn't make mistakes. So obviously there's something going on when you do have that thyroid autoimmune condition. We need to figure out, is it the virus is hiding out in your thyroid? We also see a lot of issues with fluoride, bromine, and chlorine, hiding out in that tissue as well. And that can lead to an immune response to the thyroid. So really figuring out what is that immune trigger that is triggering the immune system so heavily and potentially for so long that now your immune system is starting to attack tissue.
Yes, Lyme disease is something that is very hard to detect.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there is a kind of set test for it yet, is there? It's
No, there's some testing, like there's the Western blot. There's another test that we use here in the office, but we try to rule everything else out before we jump to Lyme, just because it is so difficult to actually pin down. There's a lot of false negatives associated with that, and then people think, okay, well, I don't have it, so I'm fine. So we're really waiting for science to catch up on figuring out Lyme in particular. It's something just so different. It's a spirochete and it can hide out in tissues so well. But really there is one of the first things that will happen is you may see that optic nerve is affected. So doing a visual test to test that optic nerve can be used as a screening tool of, okay, do we need to look a little deeper? Is it potentially, a case of Lyme? But also being said, mold can have very similar effects on the body as Lyme. So it doesn't really differentiate one from the other as well. So.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on mold here because when I started learning about the effects of mold, especially black mold on the body, I was horrified. And then I discovered that you can't bleach it down. And I remember, kind of student flats and everything, that the bathrooms were full of black mold. And I used to get my bottle of bleach and rub it down and think I'd sorted it. And actually, it makes the compounds in the black mold worse, apparently, for your health. Is that true?
Yeah, I've read about that as well, where pouring bleach on the mold is actually just going to make it worse and more toxic for you, and very likely hasn't actually taken care of the problem because those spores are going to be in the air. It's going to come back. And yeah, so bleach is definitely not the way to handle that. How I recommend, we do have a really great remediation company that we work with, that we refer our patients to all the time, because we do have quite a bit of mold up here in the Midwest in the United States. So really having someone who's very highly qualified to find the mold, but also address it in a safe and healthy way is going to be really important. But as soon as you see mold, you know that you have a really big mold problem, because you can have mold for quite a while before you're actually going to see it in your windowsills or in your bathroom. So that's when you really need a professional to come in, see if your home can be remediated. But also, if you do have mold, it's a really big process, because those mold spores have gone through your home, especially if you have an HVAC system or, centralized air that's going to be moving that air around your house. Those mold spores are going to move throughout your home, and it can go into your pillows, it can go into your mattresses, into your couch. So it's like, if you've taken care of the mold problem, but you've kept all of those materials that have the mold spores in them, it could come back. So I do not love when my patients have mold. It's a very tough conversation, but it's a very necessary one.
Yeah, no, it's in England, we have a lot of old Victorian buildings, and they're notorious for mold. And because our weather isn't that great, in the winter, you don't have the windows wide open, and it is a massive, massive problem. I mean, I have salt lamps in every single room, the Himalayan salt lamps. And I also use various essential oils to try and suck it up. But like you said, by the time you see it, it's been there for a while, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And it has some big effects on your health. So we see a lot of people struggling with infertility, autoimmune diseases, a lot of brain fog, a lot of mood issues that are associated with mold. So it's just so important, if you're living in mold, you need to get out of the mold or remediate, get that mold out of your life. It could also be in your workplace as well. So we always try to ask some questions like, do you feel like you get headaches or brain fog or more symptoms when you're at work or at home? Does going on vacation help with that? Those are some things that you can try to see, are you living in mold or are you working in mold? And then really detoxing that mold out is going to be important as well. So one of our go-tos, for telling our patients, if they are living in mold, start going to an infrared sauna, because that is going to help your body start to detox that out. But then it's also very important, as soon as you're done with the infrared sauna, shower off, or your body's going to reabsorb it in the sweat.
Yes, absolutely. And preferably a cold shower. I'm lucky enough to have a far infrared sauna and a cold rainwater shower outside. So that's my go-to, getting the toxins out. And again, I've got a podcast up with sunlight and saunas, because the results, what they do is extraordinary at detoxing and rebuilding the body on a cellular level. And a lot of people think of far infrared saunas as a luxury, and it's not. We live in a toxic world, and everybody should be trying to get access to this. And I know Sunlight and do little portable ones that you can just put on your bed. But just what else would you do for a detox if somebody's living with mold? And, what would be your protocol to detox that out the body if they can't? Because a lot of people can't move, or they can't leave their job, and and the body is incredibly resilient. It will do everything it can to keep going. So what else can you do to help it?
Yeah, there's so much that you can do for mold, but one thing that I don't have is protocols. So I take it on a patient by patient basis, and I do base it off their lab. So I typically, if they are living in mold, I do want to get an immune panel looking at their immune system and their lymphocytes and making sure, has the mold affected their immune system? Do we need to support that? And then supporting the organs of detoxification, making sure you're having a daily bowel movement. If you are not having a daily bowel movement, you're holding on to those toxins. So if you aren't having a daily bowel movement, start taking, some whole leaf aloe vera juice, or start doing something to, magnesium, something to get things moving. And obviously my preference is figure out why you have constipation in the first place, but then also liver support. So there are a lot of herbs that can really support the liver, and it really depends on how are those liver pathways functioning for detoxing mold and toxins out. So Schisandra is an amazing herb that is an adaptogen for the liver that can really help with all those pathways that help. So that's a really good general one. Dandelion root is amazing too. But then really figuring out how well is your liver functioning, how well is your gut functioning, because you really need to make sure that those detoxification organs are working as best as they can.
And yes, you brought up there the fact that you have to be having a bowel movement every day. And it's so important that you go and detox the liver and the kidneys and all of that if your bowels are blocked, because, it is that funnel that we talk about the whole time. And so, that, who is it I interviewed? Viv Clifton, who's an Ayurvedic practitioner. And she just gave a lovely description of poo, because I said, what's a good poo look like? And she said, it should be a perfect banana. And it's like, yeah. So I've told this story many times before, but I went through a period of my life where I wasn't healthy, and I then became very sick, and I only used to have a poo once a week. Literally. And I thought that was normal. And I went to my doctor when I met my ex-husband. He used to go to the bathroom every day, and I go, what the fuck are you doing? And he go, well, I'm going to the loo. And I'm going, what, every day? He's going, yeah. So he told me to go to the doctor, and I did. And the doctor actually just said 3 times a week is enough.
Wow. And that's another thing, is we see a lot of kids, like I was this kid too, that I had to go to the ER because I had the worst stomach pain in the whole world when I was like, I think 8 years old, and we just couldn't figure out what it was. They brought me to the doctor and they said, oh, well, you're just not pooping. And I didn't think anything of it because, going going like once every 2 weeks, going once every week. Like that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And I think a lot of people just don't know because that's just their normal. That's how it's always been for them. So they don't realize, oh, I should be going every day. Maybe I should be going 3 times a day.
3 times a day.
Yeah. More ideal.
Absolutely. It's quite shocking how, you just think it's normal and you don't feel ill. So, but if there are toxins in the body, it's the bowels are the biggest pathway for detoxing, along with the skin and sweat and breath work and all of these pathways that have to be addressed on a regular daily basis. And I actually believe every pathway needs to detoxify every day, which is why I do my breath work every day and detox my lungs. But moving on from here, the other main system of the body that flushes and detoxes is your lymphatic system.
Mhm.
I like to call it the lymph loo. So that lymph loo that just flushes it all out, but it doesn't have a pump. So can you just talk us through some of the things that you can do for your lymph loo?
Yes, I love that lymph loo. So some of the things I always suggest is obviously get your body moving, yoga, walking, running if you like to run. Getting your body moving is, that movement. The muscles are going to help with that lymph flow as well. So as your muscles are moving, the lymph is going to start to move. But then, of course, dry brushing. Dry brushing is a really great tool to use that can help a little bit with that lymph flow. But then we also have something called a vibe plate in our office. So if you're standing on the vibe plate, that can get things really moving as well. So those are some of my favorites. So a lot of times what we'll do is infrared sauna. I have a sunlight at home too. It's definitely something every home should have. It's an investment, but it's a really essential one. But doing infrared sauna, then doing dry brushing, then vibe plate, cold shower, all those things really helping getting things moving and flowing, and along with your other detox pathways. So
right, I don't know what a vibe plate is, so describe a vibe plate to me.
So we actually have a really big top of the line one here at our office, but it is just this big metal plate that you turn on and it vibrates your entire body.
And do you stand on it? Do you lie on it?
You could stand on it, you could sit on it. It's too small to lay down on. The one that we have, I don't know if they make bigger ones, but typically what I do is after I get adjusted, because I do get adjusted regularly, I'll go stand on it for maybe 2 to 5 minutes and really let things move and flow, and it really helps with the joint health as well. So it just is a really big shaking plate that shakes your whole body.
Another really good thing is rebounding. Just getting on the rebounder, which is just a small trampoline. I have one by my bed. Get up in the morning after I've done my hours of meditation, and I like high intensity training. I walk every day because I've got a dog, but I just get on the rebounder for 5 minutes, and that will just, it strengthens your core and just absolutely hits that lymph, that whole system. Also massaging. I every time I have a shower or a bath, I just use my essential oils and I rub on the massage points, the main points of the body. So that I think is very useful as well.
And even a gua sha tool. You can use gua sha on your body.
I love gua sha. I love my gua sha, absolutely adore it. But your main, there is a kind of, you're always pushing towards the heart, aren't you? So whether you're dry brushing, whether you're gua sharing, I love that word as well, gua sharing, or whether you're massaging yourself, you're always pushing up towards your heart. And just talk us through where the main points are in the body that you should massage or dry brush, solidly, spend a few minutes on them.
Yeah, so a big one that I focus on is the neck. You do have a lot of lymph nodes in your neck, especially, and then behind your collarbones are some big ones. Also in your armpits, there are quite a bit there as well. And then some other ones I focus on is right where your torso meets your thighs. There are some good ones there as well that we really need to work through. And if you ever, feel like very softly feel around your skin, if you feel a big like nodule, that's a good sign that there's some, there's an immune response in that nodule and you need to start getting some movement in there.
Yeah, I do it as part of my kind of daily routine, behind the ears and in front of the ears as well, coming down the neck, and the collarbone is a very big point. And just when I'm putting my face oils on in the morning, I just give that a couple of minutes, or even if it's just a minute, and you're just automatically, and the groin is a really important area of the body, actually. I mean, it also is the most absorbent area of your body to absorb vitamin D, which is why all the biohackers sunbathe naked. It's yeah, it's a miraculous little part of the body, that, for many reasons.
Yes.
And let's just cover the thyroid a little bit more here. As my audience know, I had a tumor taken out of my throat and I lost half my thyroid. And I have chosen not to take medication for it. That is my choice, and I'm absolutely not telling the audience to do the same as I've done, but that was just what I decided to do. And the doctors told me that I would never recover and that I would be in bed for the rest of my life, and I'd be very, very tired. And I seem to be okay with it. I mean, I'm pretty healthy. I'm not perfectly healthy. I have lots of my own little foibles that you kind of go, shouldn't do that. That's not healthy. And then I go, fuck it. I want to live my life as well. And I'm a great believer on living on the 80-20% rule of life. What would you suggest to anybody that has an underactive thyroid or half a thyroid like me that doesn't want medication? How would you stimulate it?
So the first thing I would say is get routine, complete thyroid testing. So here in the US, we typically, if you go to your medical provider, and there are some that actually are starting to do more, but for the most part, they're only going to test TSH, so thyroid stimulating hormone, which is just your brain telling your thyroid to create hormone. It's not a complete picture of the thyroid. And then they may test T4, but they don't typically go any further than that. So I would recommend routine testing, TSH, T4 total and free, T3 total and free, T uptake, and then also the thyroid antibodies, making sure that your immune system isn't attacking that tissue, but really making sure that that production is up, but also conversion and transportation of those hormones is functioning as well. Because if there is you have a good amount of T4, but you don't have a good amount of T3, that's a conversion issue. It isn't really a thyroid issue. We need to look at where is that T4 converted into T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. Your thyroid makes a little bit, but not mostly. Your T4 needs to be converted, and that's typically going to happen mostly in the liver. So making sure the liver is functioning well as well. Now, when it does come to hypothyroid, yeah.
I'm going to stop you there for a second, because I've been through this, so I know what you're talking about, and I've done more testing than I've had hot dinners. But for a lot of people, I was really confused when I first had my complete set, and the doctor had tested first of all, and I just had a testing for T3 and T4. That was it. And then when I went and had the complete set, and there's this whole long list of everything. So can you just break it down slowly to us?
Oh, absolutely.
What we're looking for here, because I was so confused.
Yeah, so TSH is just your brain telling your thyroid, all right, let's make hormone. The body needs more thyroid hormone. So then your thyroid is going to primarily make T4, which is an inactive form of thyroid hormone, and then a little bit of T3, which is that active form. Now, all the cells and tissues in your body, aside from that red blood cell, is going to need that thyroid hormone to function. So it's super important. And then that T4 is going to be converted into T3 in other tissues, especially the liver. And then we need to make sure if there are thyroid antibodies, that is not a thyroid issue. That's actually your immune system being hyper triggered to the point where now it's starting to attack your tissues. So that's why I like to see all of these markers, make sure, if hormone production is on the lower end, but there aren't any antibodies, okay, let's address that. But really, when it comes down to addressing the thyroid is responding to what's going on in the body. It really is, keeping watch over the body, seeing what's going on. What does the body need? Okay, I'm going to respond. I'm going to create more hormone, or I'm going to create less hormone. And it's all controlled by the brain. And one of the biggest factors when it comes to hypothyroid is actually looking at the adrenal glands. So your adrenal glands are what's going to produce your stress hormone, so your cortisol, but also it's going to make your, rest, digest, heal hormones. So cortisone, which is going to help with healing tissues if you have had chronic inflammation. Now, if your adrenal glands are producing a lot of stress hormone, you're completely stressed out because of either mental stress, or maybe there's a toxic stress on your body, or maybe there's a physical stressor like, a subluxation, which is, what we adjust as chiropractors. That can make a higher demand for cortisol. But if your thyroid kept producing the same amount of thyroid hormone, that could cause a lot of issues for you, like heart issues. It could lead to a lot of anxiety, and, it can just really cause a lot of damage on the body. So your body is super smart. It's going to bring down that thyroid hormone when you're in that stressed out state, so your cortisol can go high and go where it needs to go and support your body through that stressed state. Now, our bodies aren't meant to be chronically stressed for a long, long time. So that's when we see people go into, that hyperthyroid disease process, where you do have trouble with regulating your temperature, you have trouble with weight gain, with the fatigue, all those issues that come along with hypothyroid. But if we're just looking at the thyroid and thinking, all right, let's just give you hormones, and you still have that high cortisol, you're not going to feel good. You're not going to get healthier. You're not going to restore your body. It's just going to make you sicker. And actually on levothyroxine, which is one of the biggest, prescribed medications for the thyroid, it is contraindicated to use in untreated adrenal insufficiency. So if you do have that chronic fatigue to the point where your adrenals are just burnt out, and then you end up, supporting your thyroid with levothyroxine, then you're going to, potentially cause more damage to your body, because your body isn't meant to have all that thyroid hormone and all that adrenal gland hormones.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I mean, I was completely burnt out because I'd had 2 years in bed suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So I was completely knocked out. And yet they still wanted to put me on the thyroxine. And just my gut told me, not my leaky gut, which I said had, but my gut told me, keep away from it. Just keep away. You've got to find out. And it was really great earlier to hear you say that you don't have a protocol, because every patient is individual. And that is what is so wonderful about chiropractic medicine. I've interviewed a few chiropractors on the show, and I just great hats off to you, because all of you, none of you are, and I don't mean this derogatory at all, but just chiropractors. I don't know a chiropractor that hasn't got a whole range of other qualifications, because you just care about the whole body and getting to the root causes and looking at what the big picture is. And that, I think, is the only way that we can go forward with our health. If you want to be healthy, that is the only way forward. And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today. And I know that not many of our audience will be in Minnesota, but do you have any resources that our audience can find to help them look at what's going on in their body?
Absolutely. So we are so when I say we, here at the Wellness Way Woodbury, we actually have 3 doctors. There's Dr. Jen, there's Dr. Jules, and then there's me, I'm Dr. Kaytlin, and we are very active on social media. So if you can find us on TikTok, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at the Wellness Way Woodbury. And then if you go to thewellnessway.com, there are tons of articles and research available on a variety of health conditions, from thyroid to hormones to gut health, really everything we discussed today and so much more, really focusing on, the causes of inflammation, which is toxins, physical trauma, and then mental stress. So you can find a lot of resources at thewellnessway.com.
Oh, that's brilliant. It has been an absolute joy to have you on the show today. I love this subject. I could never talk about it enough. It was my starting point, I think, well, diet and nutrition. But then when I discovered all of these systems, and I'm like, woo, this is really exciting, how clever the body is. So just thank you so much. Dr. Kaytlin Westerberg, thank you so much for joining us today on The Wellness Way.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you.